Welcome to the North Idaho Experience. Eric and I just sat down with Randy Westlund. He's running for mayor of Post Falls, Idaho. It was actually a really exciting conversation. He has an excellent vision for the future of Post Falls. He's a very smart guy, and his values are in the right place, and that's what matters. So hope you guys enjoy this conversation, and remember to get out and vote on November 4th. If you guys are thinking about making the move here or currently live here and need help with a real estate transaction, our real estate team, North Idaho Experience, specializes in helping conservative families find their freedom right here in North Idaho. All right, Randy Westlund, welcome to the show. You are running for mayor of Post Falls. We have done a bunch of political podcasts lately. I think we're really dipping our toes. No, we're like fully half immersed in this at this point.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of Coeur d'Alene people on, but we have not gotten into Post Falls. So this excites me. I spent a lot of time in Post Falls. I don't technically live there, but I live very close to there. So I definitely want to learn about your vision of the future there and, you know, the development in the downtown district, because I think that area is pretty cool. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's start out with your background a little bit. What business are you in now?
Yeah, so first, I'm a Christian husband and father. I think that's the most important part, is that I always lead with my faith, and that guides me throughout my life. That's how I make decisions.
Yep.
My wife and I have our 5th child coming in the first week of December.
Awesome.
We're still in that kind of crazy mode. My youngest is 8 right now, almost 9. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you are fully
we do.
in it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. My wife is a rock star. It's the only way this works. Otherwise, you can't do that. And we homeschool.
Cool.
And so we've got a very full, very joyful household.
So you guys literally, you meet like the perfect image of a North Idaho family right there.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
100%,
Yeah. Check a lot of those boxes.
You definitely do.
I grew up in North Carolina, but my wife has family here going back a few generations, so she has more roots on her side.
Cool.
I kind of came into the family that way. I from North Carolina, I got my engineering degree in computer engineering, which was more hardware-based initially. Like designing processes for Intel and everything was kind of what that was. And then I came out and I got an internship with NASA after college, which is where my kind of real career path started. I actually met my wife there. We were both interns in that program, and I was one of the few who got hired on after that. So I worked for NASA for a couple of years. I did satellite communication work. I was in Antarctica.
I'm suddenly feeling rather dumb.
Yeah, they're talking about homeschooling, and I'm just picturing what that actually looks like, where they're just way further ahead in the 5th grade than I've ever gotten in my entire life. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yes. I can tell you there is no ice wall in Antarctica, but there are international treaties. So.
Damn it. Big John on our team, he swears there's an ice wall in Antarctica, and he's got a lot of theories.
He goes full flat earther. This would be a fun conversation for somebody that was in Antarctica.
Yes, I've been down there. I can tell you that. I was there in December and January, and the sun just goes around a circle in the horizon. It never sets.
Right.
And so you're like standing in a sundial. It's just, if the sun is over that hill, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and if it's over that hill, it's 5 o'clock in the evening.
What a strange feeling.
It never goes up or down. It's always like sunset, just somewhere. It just goes around.
Right. See, that'd be an excellent point to make. I talk to him all the time. I said I was on subs looking out of a periscope, and we had a thing called over the horizon, where you could see the top of a ship over the horizon. And then as it got closer, it would peak and come over. How does that work?
Right.
If it's not round. Well, either way. Good. John got a good shout out.
I'm sure there's an argument. Somebody's going to drop a comment. Well, here's how that works, sir.
Yes,
like, okay.
I know.
I'm not in on that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't think you'd be talking about this in a mayoral campaign.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a big part of the background, because that first year I was working for NASA, I was working on upgrading the satellite communication system. These were weather satellites. So when you're seeing the storm moving across the screen, they go from the North Pole to the South Pole every time. And they get a different slice of the Earth. So if you want a consistent place to talk to them, you need to be near one of the poles. So we were down there in Antarctica. And so I spent the first year upgrading that system. We were kind of replacing all of the 70s era radio gear with a little software-defined radio box that did the same job but better, and could like maintain connection as it hit the horizon for a little longer. And then the second year, they sent us back down because the program lost funding and it all got canceled. And so everything I worked on for NASA is sitting in some Indiana Jones warehouse in Maryland, never to be seen again. And I was so frustrated that they couldn't plan 2 years ahead.
Right.
The phone's ringing.
Is it? Oh, sorry.
It was just so like typical government, right?
Right.
And NASA's not what it used to be. There's a lot of just they hand off all the hard sciences to all the cool stuff just to contractors now, and they're just sort of a clearinghouse for grants. There's a lot of diversity hires and stuff.
That's a bummer because growing up it was like the pinnacle, right? Like NASA's, like
yes,
the brightest minds are going there
yes,
to do
right.
the brightest things and push us
and
out
they're
into
not
the
captured.
cosmos.
They're not captured by ideologies. They're they're just in it for the science.
And
But
government
Yes.
agencies over the last 8 years, all of them seem to have fallen victim to that.
Yeah.
None of them were immune.
Yes, that's why I've been very encouraged by seeing Elon Musk's companies and SpaceX and others to kind of take on this
Heck yeah.
mantle because it's not working so well in the government anymore. I mean, we should give NASA some credit; they're still doing some cool stuff, but for the most part, a lot of that I think is moving off into the free market, which has been a good trend. But anyway, so I left NASA, and I could have tried to transfer, but I was frustrated, and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm never going to work for the government again. So here I am, proof that God has a sense of humor, dragged into politics. Right?
Yeah.
It's been an interesting life journey. So I left with some other NASA engineers. My mentor there retired, and we did some startup companies. And we were living in Maryland for a time, and there was a year where we were all just living in this guy's house, crashing on his couch, doing like garage startup mode. We're doing engineering, prototyping. Patent holders would come to us and say, here's this idea I have a patent for. Can you make it work? And we would build the very first version, get that prototype out, and then they could go get Series A funding and things like that to get the company off the ground.
dang.
I had a lot of fun doing that. A lot of working on electronics at 3 o'clock in the morning because why not? There's nothing else to do. And,
Right.
it was a great time to kind of have that startup.
Just for the record,
experience.
there are other things to do at 3 a.m. It's probably what you and I were doing at 3 a.m. At a young age.
Yeah.
It's not productive. So kudos.
I subscribe to the Buffalo theory on brain cells, right? If I drank copious amounts of alcohol, the weak and sickly brain cells would kill off, and then the strong ones could go on to procreate. It's the Buffalo theory. It's a different school of thought. I'm not entirely sure how that worked out.
I am.
Here we sit.
All right, so Maryland.
Yeah, so I was there for a while, did those startups, and then I moved to Boston for a while. That's where my wife and I got married.
Where at? I lived in Boston for about a year and a half back
We were
in
just
04.
we were in kind of the border between Medford and Somerville, right outside Davis Square.
Yeah. Okay. I
of
lived
by
in
MIT.
Winthrop, which is a tiny island right outside of Boston. Yeah. It was a really cool experience. I really enjoyed it.
It's a beautiful city.
It is.
There's so much history there, and the design of the city is just a pleasure to walk around. And you certainly can't drive, so walking's kind of your only option there anyway. Right?
100%.
I was stationed in Connecticut. There is a hotel over there called the USS Constitution Inn, which is a Navy hotel. I am still banned from that particular facility. Allegedly, somebody of my size and statures may have urinated in a plant in the lobby in their whites. I'm a changed man now.
I can picture that so clearly.
Yes, allegedly. Yeah, but Boston is a good time. I was there for St. Patty's Day and military appreciation
Oh, dude, the
parade.
history
It was so cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
I don't even like baseball, but I went to Fenway one time just to get the experience. That was cool. Nothing like a $20 hot dog.
Yeah. So when did you end up in Idaho?
Well, so we were in Boston for 6 years because my wife was getting her PhD at MIT, and during that time, I worked at MIT as a research engineer, which was basically like being in grad school, but I actually got paid,
Right.
so we could make everything else work, right? And I got to work on image recognition systems for animal conservation in New Zealand, where you would like take a picture of an individual lizard, and the computer could tell you if it's seen that particular lizard before because their stripes are different. And we were modeling population size, and is this endangered species dying off or we're reproducing more. And I did autonomous vehicles. We were driving a little aircraft through active volcano plumes in Mexico, doing air quality testing and things like that. So
what year is this roughly that you were doing this stuff?
2019.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere around there.
So fairly recently, I guess.
No, 2017. 2018 is when we moved out here, 7 years ago. So we did that for a while, and then my wife was 4 years into this sort of 6-year PhD program, and we had our first kid, and it changed everything. We were looking around at the other sort of women who are professors there, and my wife said, "You know what? These women don't have a good quality of life. They have no time for their kids. They're not really doing a family. Their kids are in daycare all the time. They have full-time nannies.
It's
they
the
hardly
lie.
get to see that.
It's like a lie that women have been told over the years, right?
There's
you
that
got to
you
be
can
that
do
boss mom,
everything,
and
you can-
yeah. But the ones that suffer, and no offense to any moms that have done this, it's just what it is. But the kids don't. The kids do better with mom at home if
yes,
it's doable,
absolutely.
right?
And I think we were blessed by kind of that insight of having that at that stage in life. And my wife was like, actually, I don't want to be a professor. I want to be a mom. And we're going to focus on that. And that's really what's important in life. And so we decided, let's stick it out and finish it because we're this far into it. Might as well finish it, right? So we finished the program, and for that last year and a half or 2 years, we were kind of taking turns. She would work during the day, and I would take care of the kid, and then I would work at night. So we were just like opposite shifts. I was doing night
Ships
shift.
passing in the night.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yep.
It was really difficult initially, and then we had our second on the way, and she was just finishing up that program, and we decided, okay, we need family. We're not doing this small apartment in Boston thing with 2 kids. There's no help here. And without the kind of career path of we're just going to plug into this system and be in whatever cog in the machine. And so it was just like, okay, now we can go wherever we want to go. And it was the first time in our lives where we could actually pick where we wanted to live. And we didn't have something drawing us there, because I had done multiple startup companies, so I was self-employed at the time and was able to kind of work from wherever, work from home. And she didn't have anything that was tying her to a place. So we said, okay, we can go wherever we want. So we made our spreadsheet, all the places where we might live, and we ranked everything 1 to 5, weighted average, every quality of life metric, Second Amendment rights, homeschooling rights.
If I were to
culture.
guess how you would have done it, it would be like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You or
Absolutely.
I might do it with a crayon on a napkin,
Hey.
or maybe just on a whim.
Man, I'm not. It's kind of funny. There's another couple that just moved up here. We just met them when we did the client appreciation event. They moved here from Jacksonville, Florida, and he's an IT guy that can work remotely. So they had the ability, and his wife stopped working when they had their daughter.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing. They broke it down by metrics, and they had multiple states. And then they talked about, because I said, what factors did you have on your sheet, and how did Idaho, what other states were close? So I'll ask you the same. I mean, kind of like a top 5 priority. What factors did you guys plug in that had you land here?
The top ones were mostly about rights and culture. There's a lot of natural beauty. We had that on our list, but it wasn't weighted as high as, for example, homeschooling was one of our top priorities. So like, it has to be really good for homeschooling. We don't want one of these states where Big Brother's looking over your shoulder. We're going to come into your home and inspect your homeschool and all that. We're like, no, we're not doing that. That's probably the most important thing. And then obviously we want a place that's safe, and we need access to an airport, and we want family nearby. Family nearby was a big one, because we knew we needed help, and we're going to have a big family, and that works better when you're not doing it alone. You don't want to be doing it also.
Right.
So obviously you guys are conservative, or you have conservative values.
Yes.
Coming from MIT, higher education, I mean, that can't fit the cultural norm there.
Oh yeah, we didn't fit in.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way, or what? Your I guess your political leanings.
Yes. Yeah, I've always been very conservative. I grew up in rural North Carolina. We
Okay.
had 5 acres. I was out in the woods all the time, driving 4-wheelers through who knows whose property. All the signs of like, if you drive on this property, you'll be shot.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't care.
Yeah.
We were teenagers. We just drove wherever we
Yeah.
wanted. We came back when we were hungry. And that was
Gotta
that was
hit a
the
moving
childhood that I
target,
had.
sucker.
Yeah, I know. I can drive pretty fast on this dirt bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck.
So I mean, that's cool. You survived the potential indoctrination that we all hear about in higher education, and that's got to be hard to do when probably most people.
Yes, well,
lean the other
it
way.
helped for me when I was doing my bachelor's degree. I was in North Carolina, and I just commuted to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So I was living at home and driving into college. So during my like formative college years, I was still at home, still part of the family, had my siblings around, and I wasn't plugged into the frat culture and things going on in the dormitories there. And then in Boston, when we were at MIT, it was actually funny. We were there when Trump won his first election, and there were literally people crying in the streets. America is over. I didn't realize how racist our country is. This is terrible. And I was like trying to stifle a giggle. Like I can't let them know what I actually think, because they're going to like burn us out of here or something.
Yeah.
I have so many questions about this. Is like a whole different podcast, because you know what I think about like the institution of higher learning and where colleges have gone and all that.
Yes.
Do you credit the fact that you were able to do most of that off-site with avoiding some of the attempts at like being indoctrinated into a totally different way of life? We have a lot of clients that have adult kids that they sent them off to college, they saved, they send them to a 4-year college, and then they never get them back.
A lot. I've had that conversation quite a bit.
It's shocking to where like if they voted for somebody different than them, they can't even have a conversation with them anymore. And it's hard not to put that on college.
Yes.
Because they let them go, right?
It is. They're indoctrination centers.
Right.
And you have to be very careful, I think, sending children to college. I think the biggest thing that helped for me was the formation that I had as a child. Growing up in my family, my dad was a small business owner. We were always very independent.
Right.
And had that kind of mindset growing up of having the faith background and having this sort of independence as a mindset that we were kind of taking into everything that we did as a family. And so when I was in college and doing all these other things, I've always had that sort of like, I need to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be working for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I need to be in control of what I'm doing. If I succeed or if I fail, I want it to be purely my responsibility either way. That's where I flourish the most.
Yep.
And I think that kind of mindset helps with not being indoctrinated as well, because I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me something, I'm going to question everything about it, because I'm not just going to believe whatever I hear.
Right. So well-grounded, and then self-accountability helps you hold to your well-established values and belief systems.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you knew that at a young age. I mean, I didn't learn that until I was 40.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was in law enforcement for 14 years, and I just, well, we talk about this all the time, right? You're just working for the man, and if you show up with a pulse and you don't commit a felony, you get a job.
I don't know. I think what helped me a little bit is I like to argue, and I'm really stubborn. So I kind of had like my way of life and values. So maybe they changed a little bit along the way, but I always believed in individual freedom and free market capitalism, and let people make their own decisions, right? As long as it's not bothering anybody else.
Right.
And I think that's where our country's kind of gone a little funky, where no, not anymore. You don't get to make your decisions for you and your own kids. We're going to make them for you because you don't know any better.
Right. And that's was probably the biggest thing drawing us to Idaho, was that kind of mindset out here, and then that not having a place where Child Protective Services will come take your kids because you homeschooled and didn't teach them that boys can be girls or something like that.
That's fun. That other couple, homeschooling was huge for them too. It was.
Yeah, but is their mom a PhD from MIT?
No. I'm just saying. There's like some maybe. I don't know. They're super secretive, dude.
So yeah, it was very funny as a cultural thing of like getting out of Boston, because we were there, and when my wife told the other women in her lab what she was planning to do, that she was like, I don't want to be a professor. I'm going to get a PhD and then be a stay-at-home mom. And they were all like, oh, you're wasting your degree, but you're so smart. Why are you going to be a mom? You're too smart for that. And like they had that sort of liberal indoctrination, and she was so mad at them. She was like, who are you to tell me that my children are less important than working for Disney or somebody else, right? Like that's ridiculous. And
the stuff that's supposed to stay in your head came out loud.
Yeah.
I want you to repeat that and tell me if that makes any sense at all.
So yeah, that definitely drove a cultural wedge between I think her and some of her lab mates there. And so while we were there, we were weird because we were the ones who had a child in the lab, and everybody else was like, "Wait, you can't have a kid yet. You don't have tenure." They're like, You're supposed to freeze your eggs, and then maybe you have one when you're in your late 30s.
Yeah.
And like that's the trajectory. And so we were weird. We have a child, and we came out here, and it was like, wait, you mean you only have one child? This is Idaho.
Yeah, get after it. What are you doing with your life?
Another question just popped into my mind. We will get to Post Falls, promise. I think it's important to establish really your background and where you're coming from. In that college life, faith. Is that common there? Because my parents worked for a very liberal college on the East Coast, and I kind of watched them change over the years from knowing them when I was a child to now. They're very liberal, but I also watched their faith disappear. And now my mom would say she's oh my God, I'm blanking on the word.
Atheist.
Yeah. Is that common there?
There's almost no faith there. Or the people who are believers keep it very quiet.
So I'm stuck wondering if there's a correlation here somehow.
The culture is very materialist, very atheistic, very just like focus on this. And MIT in particular is a university with they put a lot of stress on you to achieve and to perform. So they're always driving you. So you don't have time to like think about important questions like you might imagine being at a traditional university. It's just like you're buried in assignments and things, and so you're so distracted, I think, as a student there with the things that you're supposed to do and how you're behind, and you've got to be at this certain percentage in your class and everything, that there's no time for kind of broader questions. And even for myself, having a stronger background than most, maybe in faith, I can tell you that my faith is in some ways on the ropes while I was there, because it turns out it's very difficult or almost impossible to be a believer in Jesus when you're the only one.
Sure.
When you're not surrounded by that community, and you feel like, oh, I'm the weird one, and so I'm going to keep it quiet, and I'm going to do this, and then things can start to shift as priorities, and then things that were important to you are maybe not as important anymore. You're not doing them as much as you used to, and so it definitely is a trying time. And I think probably anybody put in that environment for too long is going to struggle.
It'd be really hard not to. Like you're pushing against this whole wave of all these other beliefs and ideas, and it's sure is a lot easier to just assimilate.
Yeah.
And I'm frustrated by a lot of what you just described. I mean, MIT is one of the finest institutions that we have in our country by reputation, and it has been for a really long time. One of the highest levels of education that you can achieve, one of the most expensive in our country. But the way that you're describing the process, how much learning can you do if your ideas aren't challenged and you're not openly having some sort of discourse and back and forth? If it's so busy with this predetermined syllabus where you have to meet these metrics, which I think is an important part of it, how are you able to clearly establish your own foundation of your beliefs and your thoughts and your ideas if they aren't challenged openly? Does that make sense?
Yes, and this is why I think we need to return to more classical education models. Like the way universities used to be is you had a professor and maybe small classes, and it was very oral.
Yeah.
You have to be able to answer objections and to argue, and you had this sense of like, no, you have to learn rhetoric. You have to know how to read and discuss things. And I think now they can shift towards being very, it's just like a technical education, and it's very focused on that. And you don't have the same sort of like, you're going to wander around with your professor and he's going to challenge you and you're going to have to answer, and your classmates are watching, and they're going to see how you handle kind of the verbal sparring. And that's, I think, a very important part of the traditional university that I think we've lost.
Well, and even think about the professions that are coming out of that, like with what you did. If you're challenged in your work environment and you're used to being able to defend your position, and you've done that before, and maybe you're one of those people that doesn't handle confrontation well, right? Like naturally coming out of the gate, you're just not good at being able to defend yourself verbally. College should prepare you for that. So you can set up and say, hey man, hold on a second. Think about this, and this. So the loudest voice doesn't always win, which I think is a country that's really frustrating, because the loudest voices that are shouting, the rest of us that have a lot to lose sometimes are just like, all right, this one isn't worth, it's not worth continuing this fight, especially when it's just the loudest voice, as opposed to the most fact-based and reasonable path.
Yeah, I think that's something you find is that a lot of people today, perhaps even most people, are just not interested in this sort of thing. They're not interested in the truth. They're not interested in discussion. And the conclusion you inevitably come to is that they're not worth my time. Like, why would I spend time going out there to debate with these people when they have no interest in the truth? And so you just decide, okay, I'll save it for people who are actually interested. Yeah. And then you start to lose that in the culture.
I had that feeling this weekend, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, oh yeah. Is there a shred of hope in these higher learning institutions?
I think so. I think the youth are very different generationally than the last one. I think the young folks today are giving me a lot of hope with what I've seen with what Charlie Kirk was doing, and the movement that he started on college campuses. I think is a very good thing, and it's I think at this point it's mostly the administrative staff and the professors who are sort of the left-leaning ones, where it used to be the students who were pushing this, who were maybe more communist-leaning, and then the institutions shifted, and now I think it's the HR folks that are kind of running the universities, the bloated administrative staff that are pushing things more than the students at this point. I think there's going to be a pushback.
I agree with you, man. I am hopeful after watching the big outpouring of support. I mean, he was really popular before his assassination, and look what happened in the election. We had one of the biggest waves of youth vote that we've ever had, and I think the cat's out of the bag as far as four-year institutions. There's a lot more kids leaning towards technical and vocational schools, getting jobs out of the gate instead of going to a traditional four-year university for a liberal arts degree, right? I think that's starting to move away. It's no longer an assignment of success or a precursor.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that universities have done as a service to the market, so to speak, is providing you with that piece of paper, right? And that's like, if you're hiring somebody, you don't have the time to necessarily test everything about them, so you want some bit of like someone to vouch for them. And having institutions of higher learning do that, that's effectively what they were doing. They were like, okay, you can trust this person because they went through our program and they graduated with whatever level. And so that certificate meant a lot. And I don't think it does anymore.
Yep.
And so as that declines in value, there's less value in a college degree in many ways, and there's less as a business owner, if you're hiring someone, you see, oh, they have a 4-year degree from the school. It doesn't mean as much as it used to mean. So what we have to shift toward is, okay, what does mean more? Is it personal recommendations? Is it face-to-face communications? There's something else, right? That's got to replace that, because it's no longer a sign that this person is necessarily good and worth hiring. It may not mean that anymore, and so you have to have something else where you can kind of come in and say, how do I have something that helps me, something or someone that vouches for this person that I'm considering?
Yeah, it's funny. We talk about that when I was hiring cops sitting across the table, because you get kids straight out of college, some from Gonzaga, 4-year degrees, coming out of that school. I know what they paid for that. And then you've got somebody else that worked in the construction industries for several years, knows how to wake up early, knows how to put in an 18-hour day. And I found myself subconsciously going to the ones that could defend their principles and their position.
Yes.
Not as an argument, but as a foundation of who they are. I don't want somebody that's so pliable you can be adjusted or swayed on a day-to-day basis. I just want you to be well-grounded and have a solid foundation. That way I know what I'm getting consistently on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how you can achieve consistency, which I think is an underrated trait for leaders, adults, anybody. How can you be consistent if you're able to completely adjust your values, your core values every day based on the topic?
Right.
Yeah.
But man, we've talked about everything other than local politics.
Let's jump into post falls.
Yes.
But no, I mean, I love conversations like that. There's a lot of value in that. And I think people that are wanting to learn about you in your race for mayoral candidate for Post Falls will want to hear that. Right?
Dude,
that says everything.
This last election was the podcast election, and there's a reason why.
How do we do? I mean, I'm not going to say any names, but we've had a few people that are running for mayor of Coeur d'Alene, and so far, you have a lot more depth than them, right?
I appreciate that.
And I know where you stand. You're very clear on your values and your background, and that says everything to me.
That is the beauty of this last election. I called it the podcast election, because no matter what you prepare for, whatever canned statements you have in regards to you running, and you don't strike me as that individual, but somebody can piece together a 10 to 15 minute canned presentation with points and factors and all that. We're going to get through that. And then people are going to find out who you are. Yes. And then I think that's what's going to resonate, because that's going to carry your decision making, as opposed to just being a chameleon and being able to talk about this topic different. So that's why I think there's beauty in because it's not scripted. So whatever scripted blurb you have, we're going to get through that.
Yes, you can't do that on a show like this.
No.
In this format.
Right.
And you see that with the candidate forums and things like the Realtors Association hosted one at the Coeur d'Alene Library recently. And everyone had the questions in advance, and everybody gets like 70 seconds to answer the same four questions.
It's pointless.
And you're reading, and some of the people were literally just holding their paper, reading off the answers they had typed up. That was like, did that come from ChatGPT? Did you actually?
Yes.
And it's like, you don't learn anything. It's just 70 seconds of platitudes.
I don't know you as a human at that point. How do I know you're gonna stick to what you just said?
Yeah.
Now I understand where you come from. I understand your background. I'm a lot more likely to believe whatever you tell me from here on out, right?
Yes. That's going to be the new change in our society with the advent of AI. Everybody is going to be able to script something out and sound really intelligent and really good and hit certain talking points with a couple of inputs. Your emails are going to look excellent.
Yeah.
If you've got a teleprompter, that's going to sound great. Where people are going to separate themselves is just like we talked about in college, because college is going to be taught by AI. It's going to be really easy to piece all of that together and put it into a book and then have you read a slide.
Yeah.
The ones that are going to separate, the ones that truly know the topic, are the ones that can be able to stand up in front of somebody and say, I'm confident in my core values. I understand. I've invested in my level of knowledge. Ask away. Let's go, whatever question you've got. And that's where I'd love to see forums go.
Yes.
That's where right now I would love to have the three of you guys in a room. And we just have a couple questions, but then there will be follow-up questions. Then we can have some back and forth.
And discourse.
Right? Yeah.
Right?
Good civil discourse.
So, Randy, tell me about the pros and cons sheet of you deciding to run for mayor, because I imagine there was one.
It's I never thought I would be getting involved in politics. By nature, I'm an introvert. I'm an INTJ on the Myers-Briggs scale. I'm an engineer. Right? And I think I part of the reason I'm even have the ability to do this is because I was very insistent upon being self-employed, and I wanted to go from engineer to entrepreneur. And I realized to get from engineer to entrepreneur, you have to add salesman. And that made me a little salty, especially how I was like, engineers build all the stuff, we make it all work, and then salesmen just go out there and sell it, and they make more money somehow. And but kind of becoming that entrepreneurial person really forced me out of my comfort zone, which is where I think you find a lot of personal development, and that's where you need to go. And so even though a lot of this is not something that comes naturally to me to come out there and be giving speeches and everything, I kind of taught myself to do it as part of salesman for the business stuff that I'm doing for the companies that I run and everything. And so I had that as a kind of a mindset toward life of like, I'm going to find the most personal growth in the place that makes me the most uncomfortable. And so I should consider that, and maybe I should pursue that, because I don't just want the easy life and sitting back on a couch. And that's not the good life, right? You read philosophers. The good life is where you go out there and you have to have the challenges, and you have to grow and develop. And part of what got me into politics here was just thinking about, what am I leaving my kids, right? And so, and I've said we're having our 5th child. I hope to have many more. I want to have as many as God is going to bless us with. And then you start to think about, okay, what am I leaving behind for them? Is it just a 401k? Is it a nest egg? It's just money, right? They can get money in. Money's not the most important thing. What you really need to leave them is a good community, is a place to live. It's a home. It's not just the house, right? And so my wife and I had this conversation a while ago with that, like, what do we want to leave behind? And maybe it's the case that at a certain point, you're making enough money to survive. And then if you put more time into making more money, that you get pretty steep diminishing returns towards your quality of life. And so maybe it's more worth it to kind of tap the brakes on the professional side a little bit and say, let's put that extra time into the community so that we have a place where they're actually going to call home and grow up. So I want my kids and my grandkids to live in Post Falls. I want them to be baptized at my church. I want them to have roots in the community. I want to have my grandkids near me. I don't want them to just have to move somewhere else to find opportunity. And if I just focus on career, maybe I'll be one of those tech guys making $500,000 a year and running 3 companies and stuff. But then maybe my kids are all going to move somewhere else, and then I'm going to end up, having an empty life. I think that's something that not enough people think about. And if you think about that generationally, then you start to realize that, okay, we have a nation, and we inherited this nation from our ancestors, and we have an obligation to pass it down to our descendants, and it has to be better than it was when we inherited it. Otherwise, we're not doing our job as Christian stewards. We have to make sure that we're leaving something that's really valuable for that next generation. And if you don't do that, if you just focus on money, then you're kind of selling out the next generation. And I don't think that's worth it. And so that was really the mindset that kind of got my wife and I thinking about this stuff of, maybe we should do this as a family mission. So we actually have a family mission statement that, and like any good mission statement, I don't remember it, but in broad strokes, it's about having this sense that we're obligated to give back, that God has been very generous with us, and because of that, we have an obligation as Christians to really give back and to make sure that we're taking care of other people in the community as well as our own kids, and so you have to get involved. Once you realize that, you realize you have to get involved. You have a duty to the country. You can't just sit back and be the sort of couch potato patriot that's going to complain about things and never do anything. And then you reach that conclusion, and then you say, okay, that's it. I've got to get involved. This is where God is calling me to go. And even though it's not somewhere I would have expected to go, that's what it is.
That's a perfect explanation in my mind of why you should get involved in it. And I love when you start it with, I never saw myself doing this.
Yeah, usually
that tells me everything.
In summary, it sounds to me like you want to take an active role in the community that you selected out of every community in the country based on values. You want to retain those values so that other families can grow up with similar values.
Yes, there's so many cities in America that used to be great cities, and they've been totally run into the ground with leftist policies. Overrun with crime and illegal immigration, and cities that are handing out free needles to the drug addicts.
Oh, you are speaking our language right now,
and you're like, what are you doing?
Do you know that happened in our state? That happened in our state. There was a program out of Boise that was giving away paraphernalia. It was like safe drug that was funded by settlement funds. They were giving out packages with needles and clean foils because you can't have dirty foils to smoke your pills off of. Yeah, so I mean, you have to keep a mindful eye. I mean, that's why we run a judicial watch group. I think judges need to be held accountable too. So
yes, the judiciary is incredibly important, especially right now where we're trying to change the direction of the country to save America, and we see all these judges that are just putting these nationwide injunctions on the Trump administration. Right. And I'm looking back wondering, okay, at what point is he just going to ignore it? Because you can't keep bending the knee to these leftist judges that are
Right.
just telling you, don't do this, don't do that,
Right.
you can't do this. Like, actually, they're way overstepping their authority.
Right. Well, you get me going down a rabbit hole. Because look at the profession that they had previously. I have lawyers fascinate me, not all, because I don't want to lump them all into one category, but when you talk about the ability to completely apply different values and principles based on the topic, that's what they're able to, as a profession, that's what they're able to do.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to apply the same logic pattern to this case. I'm not going to apply the same values. I'm just going to be able to switch it based on the topic.
Well, as humans, we're swayed. I mean, maybe it's an attractive woman on, who knows? Like, and it shouldn't be that way. And we've talked about. I personally fully believe that AI will take over the judicial process at some point and probably do it a lot better than a human can, with human oversight, of course.
Yes,
but
it's wild.
But I could see it coming. I could see that world, and I think it would probably be better.
There'd be standards.
There'd be standards. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
What's your
Yes.
even though we do all the time.
Yes, we do.
What's your vision? What's your vision of Post Falls? What's the platform you're running on?
Yes. So first, I think the important thing is we need to have a vision. I don't think we have one right now.
This is a common theme. We just talked about this in Coeur d'Alene too.
Yes.
Like there's this, plan by 2050 or whatever. And maybe the dream is there, but there's no goals and steps to achieve that. And that's the important part.
The basic plan is like you start with a vision. Where do you want to go? And then you make that concrete. You kind of fill it out. What does it look like? How does it feel? What components are there? And then you set goals. And those goals have to be specific and measurable. And those are milestones along the way. And then you go toward the vision. You actually do this. And a lot of people don't think about that. They're, especially in government, it's just, how am I going to solve the problem this year? And not thinking about 20 years from now or where we're actually going to go. But in general, conservatives have really failed on the vision front over the past at least 60 years. The left is really good at vision. You look at them, the math doesn't work because they're selling you a socialist utopia. But the vision is always really compelling, which is why it's been so appealing to young people in college who don't have the real world experience yet, but they see the vision that the left is painting of, it's going to be great. We're going to take care of everybody. We're going to have, you're going to go to the doctor and not have to pay anything because it's all going to be paid for by somebody else somehow, and all this stuff. And so they really communicate this vision. Conservatives in general have no vision. And that's the biggest criticism that I have of the conservative movement. And you can see an example of this in Trump's first term with the repeal and replace Obamacare. Like they were going to do it. They had the votes. They had everything ready. And then the moment came and they didn't know what to do. They had no vision. They didn't know how healthcare should work. They didn't know how to fix it. And they decided, well, fine, we just won't touch it because then we'll own it. And we don't actually know how to make this work because they had no idea where to go. And we see that on all levels of conservatism. There's this sort of it's like a zombie Reaganism or something of like conservatism just means lower taxes, and that's all. And we're like, well, no, conservatism has to mean more than that, because what are we conserving? What do we care about? And conservatism can't just be, standing athwart progress, yelling stop, where you're saying I'm going to stop this, I'm going to fight against that, I'm going to fight against that, because then you're just defining yourself in terms of what you're not. And you have to define yourself in terms of what you actually believe and what you want to go for. And that's that vision, to say our vision is of a city that is a family-friendly city, that's a safe city where our kids are going to grow up and have a good quality of life, where they're going to have an easy pathway to homeownership and raising a family and having the good life. So we have to think about, what is the good life? What do we leave behind so that our kids can have that and our grandkids can have that? And it can't just be fighting against the left. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, but it has to be more than that. It has to be that vision. And it's so hard to find conservatives who are talking about vision. Most of them are just talking about how we're going to stop the left. And they're like, okay, yes, but where do you want to go? If the left didn't exist, what would you want to do? What would you want the world to be like? You have to know that to know where you're going to put your effort in, right? And so that's the first thing that we need, is that vision. And that's not something that one person can just come and say, here's the vision, because it has to be something that's kind of built by all the citizens, right, in an area, to say, what do we want as a people? But you need people who are going to lead that process. And I would propose that our vision be one where we kind of double down on American values, because there's a big cultural divide, I think, in North Idaho between the people who grew up here and the people who moved here recently, who are escaping from California and Washington and places. And it's a challenge to think about, okay, what do we all have in common? That, okay, yeah, we're all, almost all of us are conservative, but there are fractions within that movement, and there's lots of infighting in the Republican Party too. It's like what actually unites us? And it's a difficult question. But I think the answer is that we're all here because this place still feels like America. And a lot of places don't feel like that anymore. These cities that were destroyed, it's like, am I in a third world country or is this New York? It's like, it doesn't feel like New York anymore. It doesn't feel like San Francisco anymore. And while we lose these sort of historic American cities, people feel like they're taking a life raft off a sinking ship when they come to places like North Idaho that still feels like this is America. And so I think that's the uniting thing. It's whether you grew up here or whether you moved here because you chose to, like I did. You're here because it feels like America. So let's take that and let's work with it. Let's say why is that important? What is it about this place that feels like America? Is it home ownership? It's the safety. It's the culture here of independence. So let's double down on those things in our vision, in our long-term plan, and let's make sure that we're not losing that. And so when we lay out something for example, in housing, what's the priority in housing? It should be home ownership. That, to me, that's an obvious one, because home ownership is how you get plugged into the American dream. It gives you roots in the community. It gives you a reason to care. It gives you skin in the game. And if we have an entire generation of Americans who have no hope of home ownership, then we're not headed in a good direction. You have people who are just rootless, right? And they're not tied into anything in particular. When we were living in Boston in that small apartment, I didn't vote in local elections because I knew we were renting an apartment for a couple of years and we were going to move. So why would I get involved? Why would I care? Because it wasn't. We knew we were there temporarily, so it wasn't really a home. It was just a temporary thing. And coming out here, we had a very different mindset of like, this is home. We are putting down roots, and now we're going to care about things and invite people we don't know from our church over for dinner and things like that. And so when you have that mindset, that leads you into this, like, okay, now you start to think about what makes people tied to a place and really care about a place. And part of it is having unique culture and everything. But homeownership, I think, is probably the biggest one. And when we talk about conservatives being the ones who champion family values, part of that is providing the opportunity to start a family. And when you have a lot of people who are either not getting married or they're delaying family formation because maybe they're doing the two-income thing and still not able to buy a home, when are they going to have a family? When are they going to raise their kids? What's the outlook for the next generation if they're not able to form the next generation and to raise those children? And so if we don't have a way for young families to be buying a home and getting equity in something, even if it's not the dream home, right? It can be a starter home, it can be a condo, anything, right? You need to get in that laddership of home, in the ladder of home ownership, to get some equity in something, because that gives you a stake in America. And I think that's really what sets America apart from other Western nations, where you look at the nations in Western Europe that have some similar values to us. A lot of them rent almost everything, and they don't have distributed land ownership like we do. America, I think, is unique in that we own the land. We actually, it's not just a saying that America is a government of the people. It's part of that's because we actually own the land. We have widely distributed home ownership. And when you have that, you give people a stake in the community in a way that you don't have in a lot of other European nations. And that's part of what makes America unique, and what gives us this independent spirit is our connection to the land. And if we have, if that's taken away from us through regulation and rising land costs, or BlackRock and hedge funds coming in to buy it all up and rent us back to us, we're going to lose what makes America special. So that's something that I think about when I think about the vision for like, where are we headed? What do we need to keep in mind? That's one of the key things.
Yeah, and Post Falls is the fastest growing city up here. I think it will surpass Coeur d'Alene in population size.
Within 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, just more space.
More space. And that growth is important. Obviously, we're in the real estate business, so we see that firsthand. And man, that's a good way to put it. I never really thought about that, having stake in the community by owning your home. That's a difficult problem to solve up here because the home prices are so high.
Yes.
I haven't figured out. I'm hoping, people as smart as yourself can come in and come up with some solutions that would work to, achieve that goal for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you how to fix it, but a lot of them are at the federal level because it's not just a local crisis. And there are some things we can do at the local level, but a lot of the roots of this crisis are from the federal level. And so the biggest thing that we need is mass deportations. And not a lot of people want to say that because it doesn't feel nice.
Yep.
But that's the truth, is that we have a lot of people who are in our country illegally, and they're contributing to the housing crisis, both because they're consuming supply and because the cities that are kind of being overrun with lawlessness are no longer good places to live. And so people flee those cities and come to places like North Idaho, which is driving up our housing costs. And so the best way to address housing costs in North Idaho is to make California livable again.
Right.
Then people won't feel the need to come here all the time, and we'll have other places where they can live. But when you have cities that feel like they're sinking, you go to life rafts that still feel like America, right? And so if we had everywhere in the nation still feels like America, and we do this revitalization, we make America great again, then, and by large part, we fix our housing crisis.
Eric says this all the time, that states are competing for qualified citizens, and Idaho is winning right now. I'm sure there are other states too, but Idaho is definitely winning because we are pulling a fantastic. I mean, a lot of our clients come from out of state, right? The big ones you mentioned: California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado now, and they are people that have been there for generations. You know, they're established, they have money, and they have good values, and they're seeking out places like North Idaho, and they're making our community better in a lot of ways. But places like California and Washington, they are losing some of their best citizens. So to fix that over there seems like a difficult problem for sure. How do you get people to go back to these places? And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is you know, let's do the mass deportations that Stephen Miller is talking about on Twitter all the time, and let's make sure that we're enforcing the law in the country. That's the biggest thing. It's just like, hey, if you actually enforce the laws that are on the books.
Crazy how that works.
Yeah, we'd be way better off because it turns out the laws are there for a reason.
Yes.
And if you stop enforcing the law, your country starts falling apart.
Yeah, you'll be.
It's not difficult.
You'll be pleased to know, we just did a whole podcast about this, that Idaho is just officially now number 50 when it comes to total crime rate by state. So we are the
Safest
lowest,
state in the country.
the safest state in the country officially now. And that's, this is my argument to people, you know, you mentioned it earlier, those that have been here a long time or grown up here who hate the influx of folks coming from other states and wrongly think that a lot of these people here are going to change the culture in a bad way.
Yes.
This tells me that though we're growing in population, the values are right. Now we're the safest state in the country. That's pretty wild.
Well, especially because some of the places you mentioned before, the cities that have just completely eroded and turned into zombie apocalypse cities, it's not even states it's not New York. It's not San Francisco. Washington's number 4. Oregon's number 5. Colorado's number 2. New Mexico's number 1. Like, you think about some of the places that you would project to be some of the unsafest states, and it's not. I have a question for you in regards to home ownership, because this is what kept going through my mind when I'm talking to people that are moving here from other states. And this is going to come back to local politics. I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think property ownership and having a stake in the community, that sets your roots, right, and gets you more involved and more engaged. And we need active, engaged members of society. I want as many people as possible to listen to this and know who they're putting their name next to. I hate the mentality that my vote doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I bring that up because even when people own homes in some of these other states, they feel like they don't own them because their property tax rates have gotten so high. They feel like they're leasing the land from the state or from their own community. And when we look at our local budgets, what is one of the primary earmarks for the general fund? Right? It comes down to property taxes. So I think you end up with a lot of people that moved here from other states that are always fearful of increases in property taxes because they recognize what that means.
Yes.
So how do we balance that? Because a lot of people aren't making more, but their homes are worth more. Right? How do we balance that at a local level?
Yeah, so the first thing to look at that is our property tax formula in Idaho is very unique. There are only a handful of states that do it the way we do it. In most states, there's a fixed levy rate. And so if your assessed value goes up, your taxes go up because the percentage is fixed. And Idaho doesn't do it that way. Idaho has taxing districts that have a budget-based system, and they have a dollar amount of taxes that they collect in the property tax levy. And that dollar amount is apportioned out. And that dollar amount doesn't change except through 3% a year for inflation or for growth or something. So what happens is if the asset values double and your assessed values go up like we saw, the tax revenue does not double. The tax revenue stays the same, and the levy rate gets cut in half. It's a very different formula. And so I think a lot of people coming here from other states, they see their assessment notices going up. And they're like, oh, no, my taxes are going up. Well, no, not necessarily. That's not the system that we have here. And in many ways, that's a good thing because it keeps local budgets small. Because if you had all of a sudden double the revenue in a local government because the market changed and housing values just went up, you would be like, oh, we have all this money to spend. Let's spend it on something, right? But since we don't have that in Idaho, we're more austerity based for local governments. And so when people look at their assessment notices, you have to see that it's not actually tax. It's a very different system. And the drawback to the system that we have is that it's very susceptible to inflation. Because for most states with a fixed levy rate, their inflation adjustment is built in. When there's high inflation, asset values go up. So house prices go up, assessed values go up, and that means tax revenues go up. So their tax revenues automatically account for inflation. We don't have that in Idaho. Our revenues do not account for inflation automatically. Inflation can be, whatever it is, 12% or something, and then we can have the same amount of dollars in the next year as we do this year. So that puts a lot of pressure on local budgets.
I could see the risk, though, in other states. Once the government gets used to spending a certain amount of money, it doesn't go down. It never goes down.
Right.
Yes.
They never give it back.
No.
Yeah.
So, if they take in less tax dollars a following year, that's where it would get sticky to me. So I can see the value in the way Idaho does it, but is that flawed in your opinion?
I think there's no perfect system.
Yeah.
And we have the benefit of not ballooning local budgets, but we also have the drawback of not accounting for inflation. So in an environment in which inflation is low, our system works pretty well. But what we've seen is record inflation over the past several years, and it's still really high, and the Fed can't get it under control. And that means that our system is really strained because of that. And it's local budgets everywhere. It's not just cities. It's every library districts, highway districts all across the state. But they're all feeling the pressure of inflation because inflation is making our dollars worth a lot less than they used to be. Since 2009, cumulative inflation is like 40%.
And we're facing an increased burden on infrastructure and public systems, public safety. So I can see that being a challenge.
So at the same time that inflation has been out of control and the revenue that we do have is becoming less and less valuable in real terms, the costs of maintaining infrastructure have skyrocketed. So it's kind of a double whammy because a lot of what the city spends money on is construction related. And those costs went up like 40% overnight during COVID, and many of them didn't come back down. So, for example, the city of Coeur d'Alene just did a levy on the ballot, a bond on the ballot to get a fire truck. They had to replace some equipment for their fire department. And what used to cost $600,000 now costs $1.2 million for that same fire truck just a couple years later. And some of these are supply chain disruptions during COVID that just stuck around. And once prices go up, they're kind of sticky. They don't fall very easily. And so that's really putting a lot of districts in a difficult position, which is why we're seeing so many of them come out to do these supplemental levies on the ballot. Yep. Kootenai County Fire and Rescue is doing that this year because they're in that similar position. The money that they had is all of a sudden not worth so much, and the costs are going up astronomically.
Do you have any thoughts on how to remedy this, or at least move it in the right direction?
Yes, abolish the Federal Reserve and return to the gold standard. We need to have control over our money again and have constitutional money. That's a different conversation.
Yes.
That's a whole other podcast we might have to do.
If we were able to say, North Idaho hereby declares that we're going to abolish the Federal Reserve for that, I think our economy might actually operate in the black.
Yes. So that's really the foundation of all of this, is that if we have an inflationary economy that's driven by Keynesian economic policies and especially modern monetary theory, this kind of crackpot idea that you can have whatever amounts of inflation and debt you want, and as long as GDP is growing faster, you'll be just fine if the debt keeps expanding forever. And that's absolutely absurd. Only an economist can come up with that as a thing that sounds okay, right? And so if we don't fix inflation, there's no fixing anything in the economy because everything is tied to the dollar. And if our dollar collapses, the whole economy comes down, probably globally, not just a national thing. And so that has to be fixed. On the local level, obviously, we can't change that. So our task is, how do we handle this in the meantime, assuming there's going to either be some dramatic reform at the federal level or our economy just crashes, which is the other option, which hopefully we don't have to go there. But in the meantime, it's just how do we hold out as long as we can. Right. And hope that inflation doesn't get much worse.
Where do you stand on public safety? Obviously, it's near and dear to our hearts. And how can Post Falls do a better job of retaining cops and firefighters because of the pay scale? Ultimately, a lot of guys end up working on the Washington side.
Yeah, we had a real problem with that. We had 11 officers leave in 1 year because for a period of time, Post Falls was the lowest paying agency, which is obviously a problem. If you want the best people, you don't get that by paying the least. Mm-hmm. And so we were getting people who were not able to get hired by other agencies, and that's not the recruitment pool that I necessarily want in my city. And we had this problem where we would get people who we would come in and train them, right? We would put them through post. They would go through all the academy and everything. And then we have kind of that expense. And then after 9 months, they do a lateral transfer to Spokane where they make more. Mm-hmm. And we just paid to train someone that now Spokane has on their streets. And we're like, wait a minute, this is not a good setup. And so the city had to do kind of a mid-year pay adjustment to put us back in line with what the other areas in Idaho are paying. But we do have a problem with that fundamentally because it's hard to compete with Spokane for wages. And this is not just in government, this is in everything else too. But I think it's a particular problem in government because they have a bigger tax base than we do. They have more resources in that respect. And so it's hard for us to maintain that. What really helps us, I think, is that the quality of life is much better in Idaho. And if you're working in law enforcement, you don't want to be under Washington law if you have to shoot somebody.
Exactly.
You're 100% right. It is. My mom retired from Spokane PD. My stepdad just retired from Spokane PD about 2 years ago. And I was an Idaho cop the entire time. It is far better to be a cop in Idaho where your citizens actually back you up. I think there's a magic number in there. I think most people can suck up, that 5 to 10% different. But, if it's in that 5 to 8% range, they can probably suck that up because operating on this side is not only safer for your ability to go home at the end of the day, you're less likely to just get absolutely skewered or frickin' persecuted, in local media. Mm-hmm. Working in Washington is not easy, but how do you
could end up where, like Derek Chauvin, right? A George Floyd situation happens and maybe you follow procedure and you just become, you have to be punished because of the race of the person involved.
It's trial by media.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's trial by media.
Yeah, I know a guy going through the ringer over there. Yeah, he's a cop, got in a shooting, and it's been over a year, and I think they finally did his IA for the shooting, and it's like, why does it take that long?
Oh, what they don't realize is what that does to somebody at home when you're waiting for a year or two to see if you're still going to have your individual freedom or whether you're going to be able to keep your house.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Those are vicious. But in regards to that, obviously, nobody that's running for mayor is going to say, we shouldn't focus on public safety. I'm sure that was on your metrics somewhere, right? Again, Idaho's statistically the safest state in the country right now, especially being in North Idaho in general, and Kootenai County being that close to Spokane and what we're able to accomplish. And the differences between Spokane and North Idaho are crazy. But how do you balance that along with budget, right? Like that is always what it boils down to. Yes. What do you prioritize? Because we're talking about infrastructure and we're talking about public safety.
Yes, I have a way that we can fix this.
Send it.
And it's a good one. So first, we do need more investment in public safety. We have the lowest officers per 1,000 in Post Falls of the areas around us. I think we're at 63 sworn right now. We need a lot more. And I think we've been kind of on a shoestring budget for a long time. And we're seeing rising crime. There's more problems in Spokane that are coming across the border. And we have the I-90 drug trafficking corridor coming right through the middle of our town. Mm-hmm. And we're the first line of defense in Idaho. And so there's a lot of opportunity for kind of crime and bad things to come into our town. And we have to make sure that does not happen because if you want somewhere to be a good place to raise a family, low crime is like the number one. It's like low crime and good schools and then infrastructure, right?
Right.
And so we need investments in public safety to keep up with this. And especially as we're seeing more sort of leftist political violence where there's this sort of trannies shooting up schools or Charlie Kirk being murdered or things like that, right? Idaho could be a target for some of that.
Sure.
We're known as a conservative state. And people who are in that sort of deranged mindset, they might come up here and try to cause problems here. And we saw, even on Canfield Mountain recently, right? We saw some of that. So it's sort of terrorist style attack. And we've got to be ready for that and know that there's probably going to be more of that in the future. And so we do need to spend more on public safety in order to maintain the service levels that we have now. And that's the big thing is like we don't want service cuts. particularly in public safety. We don't want to start cutting that back at a time when we have more and more threats. So we need more funding for it. Okay, how do we find more funding? One way to find more funding is by raising taxes a lot. And we don't want to do that because this is Idaho. Part of our identity is being low tax and being independent. So the high tax solution is not one that's going to work for us. But you see that in places like Martha's Vineyard and some of the older neighborhoods in the northeast parts of the country where the politicians all live, where they get away from all the messes that they make, right? They go back and they have these multi-million-dollar houses with absurdly high property tax, but they don't care because they're taking bribes or something, so they can pay for all of that.
Right.
We're not going to do that here. We're not going to be a high tax area. So the solution is the tax base. It's the economic growth, because the answer to keeping taxes low has never been cutting services. It's through economic growth. You keep taxes low by growing the economy. You make the pie bigger. And what does that look like? In a city, it looks like commercial development downtown. And this is where the downtown comes in. This is why we need a downtown.
Talk to me, brother. I live 5 minutes from that downtown that you're about to talk about, and I love seeing what's going on over there
we talk about this all the time. I think downtown Post Falls is the next one, because everybody in our local area, when you talk about downtown, what are they talking about? Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene, yeah.
There's only one.
Yeah.
There's only one. How do you grow that area? Because I know that neighborhood.
Yes, and there are other reasons why this is really important, because if you look at the sort of suburban developments going in, the city is losing money on those. We get impact fees that come in at the beginning. We get permits and fees that are paid to the city, and the developer pays for the initial infrastructure, the streets and the sidewalks and all that stuff. And so when a new development goes in, the city has no upfront cost. In fact, there's a one-time influx of money from the development. And then for the first 15 or 20 years, there's really no maintenance because everything's brand new. We have to plow the streets, but everything there is fine. And then you get 20 years later, 25 years later, and then, okay, well, now we're going to have to start repaving these streets, and these pipes might need to be replaced, and there's real maintenance costs that come up. And you look at that, and that's when you realize the tax revenue we're getting from these neighborhoods does not pay for these streets long term. Even if we had it all set aside in a piggy bank, you amortize it out over the lifetime of the assets, it's not enough, not even close to enough. If you had a self-sustaining suburban development, the taxes would have to be 4 or 5 times what they are just to pay for those streets. That's how significant the problem is. And what cities can fall into is like a Ponzi scheme. You have to keep growing because you have to have some way to pay for the maintenance on the things that you did 20 years ago.
Coeur d'Alene's like that. It's a constant, like, urban renewal district is where they want to get all their money from, and that's the only place they say they can get it.
Yeah, so you end up stuck of like, well, we have to keep growing at an exponential rate. It's the same as the U.S. economy in general. It's built upon this idea of like exponential growth. Social Security being an example of that, right? We no longer have that sort of growth of the economy, and so Social Security is insolvent. And cities are going insolvent who rely on this growth model. And the ones that have been doing it for longer, like Detroit and Chicago, you see them falling apart. They're totally bankrupt. And so when you have those neighborhoods, if you have only those neighborhoods in a city, if you're a bedroom community of suburban neighborhoods, you cannot financially sustain that. It will cause your city to go bankrupt eventually. It's just a matter of when. And that's kind of the direction that Post Falls has been headed in, is we're a bedroom community. We don't really have the downtown. So the way to do that is either absurdly high taxes, which we're not going to do, or it's through the downtown, which actually is tax positive, which you need to balance out the neighborhoods, the suburban areas. So the high value commercial properties downtown, the metric to look at is taxable value per acre. And so when you look at like on Sherman Avenue in Coeur d'Alene, the taxable value per acre of the stores there is very high because their acreage is so low. And they don't have giant parking lots and all that. There's just like the building, right? And it's touching the next building. And those are very high value properties. And so the property tax that comes off of that is more than enough to pay for the street in front of the business. That's what subsidizes the residential areas. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to pay for it. So the way to do this is we need to build the downtown in Post Falls, and we need it to be a good, like, beautiful, walkable downtown with commercial, good commercial development that's serving residents. And when you do that, you're not only increasing the tax base in general, but because of the way our tax formulas work, you're actually pulling taxes away from residents onto the businesses in the downtown. So you can both expand the budget to account for inflation and rising costs for public safety and other things, and actually lower taxes on residents at the same time if you're building the right kind of downtown and getting the right kind of commercial growth in. And this is all about economic growth.
Just to be clear, what area specifically? Because there are a couple little pockets in Post Falls. I'm guessing you're talking Spokane Street south of 90?
Yes, Spokane Street, east and west sides of that street, and then kind of east to Idaho Street, where the new Millworks development is.
Which is pretty cool area right there. All that area, like, when I drive through there's some new businesses popped up. The food truck court eats on Spokane Street.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then I know they're putting another building in closer to the freeway. I'm not sure what it is. They're doing the pouring the footings for that right now.
Yeah.
But that whole area, I think it's really cool. It's already got a nice vibe to it. So if it's done right, it would definitely rival, it doesn't have the history of Sherman Avenue, but it could rival that.
Oh yeah, it's going to be better. I'll channel my inner Trump. It's going to be the best ever. It's going to be amazing. We're gonna have the best businesses.
It's going to be amazing.
But I think we really do have an opportunity here, and this is why I'm more excited about Post Falls than Coeur d'Alene, because Coeur d'Alene is mostly built out. Like it is what it's going to be. It's a tourist town. The downtown is largely serving tourists, and there are nice art galleries and things, but a lot of those stores are. You don't have people living here who are going in to buy things every day from those stores on that downtown.
It's tourism based.
Yeah. Because of the tourism.
Because it's a resort town.
Sandpoint and
Do you hear that, Boise legislature? It's a tourist town. I don't care if it's over 10,000 population.
Yes. We need to get that through. Yeah.
We've been talking about that a lot lately.
Yeah. So we have that, and we need to really build that out and make sure that we have that kind of commercial growth, and that area is going to be where it happens. And there's land that's west of Spokane Street, north of the river, that was tied up in a lawsuit for a very long time, and it's come out, and that's being sold off. So we're going to see development there. We're going to see a lot of development in the downtown-ish areas of Post Falls over the next 10 years. And the question is it going to be good or bad development? Is it going to be the kind of things that we want? And the reason why I think
that look was because we've been talking about buying office space over there.
Oh yeah,
I've been pushing for that
Me too.
area because I think it's the next big.
It's a good investment.
Yes. Because downtown Coeur d'Alene, it's downtown Coeur d'Alene is built out.
Yeah, it's very expensive already.
So that was our little secret. I told us so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can also have a very different character to the downtown, because Post Falls is not going to be a tourist downtown. We can do better. Tourist economies are not the best economies. They're not the most robust. They're seasonal. You're serving people who don't actually live there, so you don't have money circulating in the local economy as much. When you have a downtown that's serving the residents, that's the kind of businesses that you're actually going to go to all the time. That's like, oh yeah, this is a good place to hang out. My buddies and I go down here all the time. We get a drink. We go next door. We get a sandwich, whatever it is. That kind of stuff where you actually want to be downtown and spend time downtown, not just as a tourist, but as a resident. Now you have money that's circulating in the local economy, and people who are working here are working those jobs, and their friends are coming in and patronizing those businesses. And that's the kind of economy that you can set up. That's serving the locals way more than a tourist economy. And that's a lot more robust, because tourist economies suffer in any kind of recession because it's a luxury good to go on vacation. And when you don't have that, when you have something that's built upon local industry a little more, that's way more robust. Mm-hmm. That's what we can do in Post Falls.
Do you have any insight on things that are going to be built there, or is this like a longer term?
It's longer term for sure.
Okay.
One of the it would be nice if we were just playing SimCity, and then we could just come in and say, we're going to put this here and this here. We're going to like master plan it all and make it. But it's a market economy, and the city doesn't go in and buy these properties. And we have zoning and building codes and things, but we're relying on the free market to come in. Somebody has to buy that and develop it.
And you don't want to overregulate it, right? Yes. And that's the hard part out here is how do you regulate that from a city council or mayoral position. And mayoral position's weird anyways, because you're generally just kind of overseeing the city council, and you can break a tie or whatever. But a lot of the industries that are big out here are going to be what? It's going to be tourism based, right? So how do you avoid just a shitload of condos going onto all those spaces? Because Seth is going to tell you he wants a pilgrims market in downtown Post Falls.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. That's what he's going to want down there. Let me ask you this, man. I mean, getting into the political side a little bit, your vision for that downtown corridor and your thoughts and ideas on how to increase funds without taxation, how does that differ than your opponents?
You would have to ask them for their visions on that.
Right.
I think I haven't heard much from them in terms of vision and plans for that.
Right.
That's kind of one of my experiences with my foray into government is like, why is nobody talking about vision and long-term planning? I feel like I'm the only one talking about it sometimes.
Interesting. I don't disagree with you, but everybody says, oh, we need to decrease taxes and increase public safety.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the guys that are listening that wear blue and or live in Post Falls that are going to be very acutely interested in this race are going, okay, how do you do it then? Right?
Yes.
How do you do it? How do you retain our people so I'm not forced into overtime and missing every birthday and missing every holiday? How are you going to keep us employed and keep us competitive and at the same time keep taxes down?
Yeah.
Right?
That's and I it would be difficult, I think, to be in law enforcement in a red area like this because if you were in a very liberal Democrat area, they're just like, yeah, sure, let's raise taxes all the time. We have plenty of money for everything, and maybe you wouldn't worry so much about being paid well. But in Idaho, because there's such a staunch fight against any sort of taxation, being working in public safety, whether you're in law enforcement or a firefighter or something, you're relying on that tax revenue for your salary, and you're surrounded by people who don't want to pay you more.
Right.
And there's a tension there, right? Of like, well, okay, we're all conservative, but we also want a good place to live. We want to be in a first world nation here. We don't want to just cut everything back and do this austerity thing.
Well, and apathy gets in the way too, because they'll look and be like, oh, we're 50th. We're the safest state in the country right now.
Yep.
Maybe we just, we're safe here anyways. It's a product of the community. And I do believe it's a partnership.
Yes.
It is a partnership between the community, citizens, and, first responders. But, so I think you kind of fight that. And they're like, oh, maybe we don't need to pay them as much, right? Like we're doing really, really well. Everything's fine.
Yes.
It's a product of the community. But you're 100% right that I-90 it's designated high-intensity drug trafficking area by the DEA. I mean, we get pass-through crime here all the time. And I can tell you from a cop in Coeur d'Alene, bad guys with warrants fled Coeur d'Alene and would hole up in Post Falls. And that is not an indictment of the people that wear the uniform there. It's just there was a different direction, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have the same number of cops. And Post Falls has a different response too. They respond to a lot of medical calls too. And
Yes.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's different. And I can just tell you from my experience, they would leave Coeur d'Alene and then go to Post Falls, right? Like there's no walls between our cities. There has to be a collective mission,
Yeah.
not just politically, but in law enforcement as well.
How does Post Falls do with bigger industry? I know there's some, Buck Knives is
Yep.
in Post Falls, right?
Yep.
And then some companies we talk about. There's a lot of cool industry in North Idaho that kind of matches our values, like G9 ammo.
Yes.
I guess Gunbutters is in Rathdrum, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, but close. Anyway, is there a way to attract more of that and space for it?
Yes, we definitely have the space for it. Pleasant View on the west side of town is really our industrial corridor. And ITD might make that an interstate because they're still doing this transportation study and everything. But there's a lot of zoned property for industrial out there. Some of that was recently annexed. And so we have the space, and it's close to 90. It's a great place to come in and put a warehouse.
Yeah.
And there's shipping centers that are looking at this. There's more manufacturing.
Oh, the
companies that are looking
overpass
at this.
getting onto 53 is going to be so nice for anybody that has to transport because you aren't going to get stuck behind a train.
Yeah,
We've had-
the trains are they're a little rough.
We've had lately a few business owners in Washington reach out that are looking to move their whole business out to Idaho. So, how does a city like Post Falls compete with other cities, to attract them there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is vision, and you can imagine, like if you're looking to relocate a business somewhere and you're a sizable company, you talk to the mayor of the cities, right? And in some cities, the mayor is like handing you money, right? Like, oh, we're going to give you all this benefits if you come here, and we're going to buy you off and everything. And they kind of shop around, like Amazon does this, right? They're
Yeah.
like, how much will you give me? How much will you give me? And then they kind of take advantage of whoever's the sucker at the table willing to put in too much, right? And that's not what we want to do. You don't hand out taxpayer money in order to bring in some big corporation. What you need is local entrepreneurship because the businesses should be locally owned. And I'm a localist from an economic perspective. I think we need to be buying and selling locally as much as we can. It's like support the local farmers, buy local. Let's keep the money circulating in our economy and not sending it abroad, right? For the same reasons that we want to have tariffs on imports from foreign nations so that we have our own economy, as being strong. Those same principles apply to Idaho as a state, that we should have good industries in Idaho. We should be supporting those industries and making sure that we have that here. And so you can imagine, like if you think about a sales pitch for whatever, like from some movie, and there's like the CEO who's there selling as a salesman, and then there's the engineer who's there. And the engineer gives the technical details, and then the sales guy like closes the deal as the CEO. And he's the guy that gives the handshake and they close the deal. And you can imagine the mayor doing that with, say, a development director or somebody from planning and zoning, talking to a business moving here. And we have somebody from the planning department who can answer their questions about here's exactly what you would be able to build and all this stuff. And then it's the mayor who's closing the deal, who's saying this is the vision. And that's really a vision thing. Say, no, we're not going to give you a pile of taxpayer money to bring your company here. But this is where Post Falls is going. This is why it's exciting. This is what you can be part of. These are the educational opportunities we have here with the Workforce Training Center, with K-Tech, with all the other things we have going on. This is like, here's the pipeline where you're going to get talented employees. This is why the city is so exciting. This is why we're growing, and we're going to keep growing, and we're going to have more industry coming in because we had a lot of population growth that's made it more attractive now for businesses that haven't come in yet. And so the first movers getting in here are going to be in a really good position. And if you have a mayor who's selling that vision to them, I think that's really valuable to go out and say, this is why Post Falls is the most exciting place for you to put your business right now. This is why you should be investing in our community and not somebody else's. Look at the directions that the states are headed. Do you like the direction that Washington is headed? Do you want to put your business there? Or do you like the direction that Idaho is headed? Do you want to be on this side of the border?
Mm-hmm. I think more and more businesses are I mean, obviously money is always a factor, but I think values may play a big part in the decision making in the future.
Do you want to open the front door of your business and not step in human feces? I think that would be a pro. But I also think, look at the quality of life, look at the likely structure that your employees' families are going to have here. Mm-hmm. I think that is huge for what you can expect from that employee.
Yeah.
Right? Is it founded in principles? And this small town community that we still have here, I always say that North Idaho is a throwback. It's a 20, 25-year throwback. It reminds us of what life was like when we were kids, right? That should be a huge selling point to employees. And we've had several call us and say, I think 60 to 70% of my employees would come with me.
Yes.
Which is huge. Then the burden becomes on us. Hey, could you find us housing?
Yeah.
Right? Could you? And that's all right. Yeah, probably. Yeah. But
that values alignment. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the really important part of this. Is if you're operating a business in America today, maybe 20 years ago it didn't matter so much who your customers were. Now it does. Mm-hmm. You need to know who your employees are, that they have your values in mind, because we've seen these sort of leftist employees holding companies hostage,
absolutely
destroying them. And it's like you actually can't hire a radical leftist. You have to be careful about that.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be hiring conservatives, and you want customers who are conservative, who aren't going to cancel you because you said something supporting Trump, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to have this. I mean, people talk about like national divorce or something, right? That separating right and left, and maybe it doesn't have to be that extreme. But if you're setting up a business and you're relying on that income to feed your family, you need to know that it's stable. And to do that, you need to be working with people who have your good in mind, who are stable employees,
and
stable customers.
You're responsible to all your other employees too. You're putting food on their table.
Yes.
And are you going to welcome this entity in that could potentially disrupt and destroy all of that?
Yeah.
Right. That's the constant evaluation. That's where it gets pretty. It's wild as a country. That's why I see it starting to swing back to normal. And it's this new generation. New generation is like, okay, I don't like where that's going anymore. I'm about done with that.
Yes.
Going back to thinking for myself.
Yeah. When's the election coming up? Early November?
November 4th, yes.
November 4th, okay. We will obviously get this out before then. Any other final thoughts? We're pushing on time here. I want to wrap it up.
Oh, yeah. I want people to be excited about the future.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things is like there's been so much blackpilling and so much of like, America's doomed. There's no political solution. People are just like they're sad and dejected and not engaged in life. And I think this is the most exciting time to be alive, because if you've seen that cycle of like good strong men create good times, good times create weak men create bad times. We're at that point of like, now is the time for strong men to come in and create good times again. Mm-hmm. This is the building phase. We're not in the decadence phase where we just get to like float on the previous generation's accomplishments anymore.
Right.
I think our parents and grandparents got to do that. Now we're in the position where we're like, okay, now this is the exciting time where we get to build stuff and we get to create the robust economies and the local resilience and the stuff that I think our grandkids are going to look back and say, wow, my grandfather was a part of that. He built this, and he was part of this whole project, and that's an exciting place to be in. And I think we need that hope for America. And I'm very encouraged by what I've been seeing, that there is this sort of upswell of pro-America energy with the Trump movement and with Charlie Kirk's impact and everything. That there's a lot of hope for the future right now, right? A lot of young people are getting involved now. They're like, okay, yeah, we can actually do something. We can change the direction of this. And I think that God has been very merciful with our country. He's given us a lot of chances. I think our nation has turned its back on him.
A lot of grace.
Yeah, and he's given us chances, and he gave us another chance. He spared Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania. He's giving us another chance to turn back to him. And I've been looking at this like, if God keeps giving us more chances, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah at some point, because they're like, we're getting pretty far along here. So I think maybe this is our last chance, right? To like return our nation to faithfulness and to build something good. And I think that's a really important part of this is to be bold about being Christian in public. That I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of controversy around being a Christian and then carrying that into public office. I think a lot of people get tripped up in this, like, well, I'm a Christian in my private life, but then I get elected and I can't have any of that in the public office. And that's never what America was supposed to be. We are a Christian nation, and you are supposed to have those Christian values explicit in how you lead in government too. And so I think that's something that I hold as a value of like we should not be ashamed of being Christian, and we should not be quiet about it. This is our heritage as Americans.
Well said. Well, you got me excited, and I can't even vote in Post Falls. Dang it! But it gets me excited about Idaho in general, and especially North Idaho. More people like you, and I'm seeing more and more stepping up.
Bright minds,
because
man.
It's the right thing to do, because it's a duty.
Yeah.
How long would you stay in politics?
I have no idea. I never thought I would be here. God is leading me in this direction, and wherever he leads next, I do not know. But we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Good stuff. Well, Randy Westlund, thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Man. That was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Catch you next time. Go vote.